Hi everybody, and welcome back to Teachers Talk Money, where I help teachers master their money in order to give back to themselves. Today we are going to talk about debt repayment strategies. These are all such useful tools to be able to repay your debt in a way that makes sense and will be the most motivating way for you. When I was paying off my student loans, things were really simple. I had 7 different loan accounts, so it wasn't, a crazy unruly amount of open accounts, which was a benefit for me. And in addition to that, they all had very similar interest rates. And all the interest rates were pretty low, seeing as they were, student loans instead of consumer debt, which can usually carry a much higher interest rate. And so the stakes were not super high for me in terms of which repayment method I decided to choose. Because knowing all these things and knowing the fact that I was so committed to paying off my debt as quickly as possible, I really could have chosen any debt repayment method and it would have been okay. That's not true for most people. Debt for many people takes the form of a variety of loan amounts, a variety of interest rates, a variety of servicers, and all of those factors that really complicate the process of paying it off. But no matter where you're at, understanding the different strategies and choosing one that's going to be best for the nature of your debt as well as your personality is a crucial step to finding debt freedom. So today we are going to talk about the debt snowball method, the debt avalanche method, and the debt lasso method, and compare and contrast how these methods are different and who these methods work best for. Let's start off right away with the debt snowball method. This was actually the method I personally chose. I think just because I was following a financial plan that outlined this as the best method, but I really could have chosen any method because my interest rates were so similar, so this one actually was a pretty good choice for me. Basically, in the debt snowball method, you're making minimum payments on all of your debts. You have all of your debts listed out. You're aware of the amount of each one as well as the interest rate, but you choose to disregard the interest rate and throw any extra payments above the minimum towards your smallest debt first. And then when that debt is paid off, you put all that minimum and extra money that you were putting towards the smallest debt towards your next smallest debt, and so on and so forth. This method, for a lot of people, does not make mathematical sense, right? Because the interest rates are what is increasing your debt so much, causing you to stay in debt longer and causing you to ultimately pay more. However, what this method does do so well is that it's incredibly motivating, because instead of waiting months and months and months to get one small money win, like you might do if you're paying off a huge debt with a huge interest rate with a different method, instead, you are getting small wins along the way. You're crossing off those debts as you pay them off, and you're able to feel really good about it because you're making fast progress that's very visual, very visceral, and you're actually kind of closing out those accounts, leaving them in the past and being able to focus on bigger things and more debts. So by the end of this method, you are going to end up paying more in interest than you would with another method. But if that's the method that's going to get you to stick to it, then it is absolutely the best method for you. So let's talk about who this method is for. The debt snowball method is great for people who think they might get off track in their debt-free journey. This is really big. If you're somebody that's really just kind of starting out with money management, you're not sure if you're going to be able to stick to these things, the debt snowball method's a great option because you're actually going to get those small wins that are going to create a lot of momentum for you. It's also great for people who are just in need of some money wins. If you've been facing a lot of losses with your money lately and you're starting to feel just disenfranchised and just completely unencouraged, then the debt snowball method is something that can really motivate you and get you back on track. This is also great for people who have a lot of small debts versus like 1 or 2 larger debts, right? Because this is gonna be the person who gets a lot of momentum from this, because you're just gonna be able to cross things off left and right. If you have 1 big consolidated debt or 2 big consolidated debts, it's not really going to provide you with the same momentum. And finally, this method is great for people whose debts all have similar interest rates. When I was paying off my loans, I believe they all had right around a 4 or 5% interest rate. And so it really didn't matter to me if I paid off one before the other because the interest rates were so similar. So I wasn't going to be losing that money on interest that you typically would with the debt snowball. So if all of your debts have similar interest rates, you might as well do this method because you'll get that momentum and you won't be losing out on as much money as you would if your debts had widely varied interest rates. Now let's talk about the debt avalanche method. This method is wonderful too. So with this method, you do the same process where you list out all of your debts and you are of course paying the minimum on all of these debts first. But all of that extra money you're throwing towards your debt above the minimum actually gets focused on your debt with the highest interest rate and instead disregards the size of the debt. So with the debt snowball method, just to refresh our memory, you are paying off your smallest debt regardless of the interest rate. And with the debt avalanche, you're paying off the debt with the highest interest rate regardless of the size of the debt. So this method is more mathematically sound, which means if you stick to it just as well as you would stick to the debt snowball method, you are going to end up getting out of debt faster because not as much interest will accrue that you have to pay off, and you will end up spending less money toward your debt. It's true that you're not going to have these small immediate wins the same way that you might if you did the debt snowball method, but it is motivating in another way, and that's if you are motivated by these mathematical wins and by the fact and knowledge that you're doing the right thing and that you're going to get out of debt as fast as possible and pay as little money as possible. So for some people, those small, visceral, physical wins where you can actually, cross off the numbers super fast and you're able to pay off them every couple of months or something quickly like that, that might be more motivating for you. And in that case, you probably want to try the debt snowball method. But you might also be somebody who's motivated by looking at the numbers realistically and saving yourself a little bit of monetary trouble and saving yourself some time. So it's not that the debt avalanche method is necessarily less motivating. I would say it's just motivating for a different type of person. This method is great for people who tend to be more motivated by avoiding having to pay interest to these companies as well as shortening their timeline. People who are confident in their ability to stay the course during their debt-free journey. So if you're somebody who is hyper-focused and you're not going to get thrown off by a small obstacle, then the debt avalanche method is probably the best choice because you're actually going to save the most money. And finally, this method is great for people who have a wide range of interest rates on their various debts. If you have a wide range of interest rate and your highest debt is your highest interest rate and there's no reason to focus on that smallest debt, you may want to start with the debt avalanche method. Last but not least, we are going to talk about the debt lasso method, which is sort of a combination method with the debt avalanche, but it brings into play a couple of great ideas that you can really apply regardless of what debt repayment method you're using. So similarly to the avalanche method, you're going to list out all your debts, and you're definitely paying the minimum on all of them, and you are focusing on the highest interest debt first. So any money above the minimum that you have to pay, you're going to pay towards your highest interest debt. But what you do in addition to that through the debt lasso method is you call all your servicers and negotiate the lowest interest rate you can possibly get. This is something I feel like anyone doing any method should be doing because it's going to save you a ton of money. Also with the debt lasso method, the idea is we're, slowly shrinking all of the impacts of these debt just like a lasso. You can transfer some of your debt balances to a zero interest loan or card. This means that you can focus on paying down the principal of the debt without having to worry as much about all of the interest that is accruing. This kind of sounds a little bit too good to be true, and it's not. It is real, but there is a catch. And the catch with that is that when you get a zero interest card or loan, there are always some stipulations in the fine print, and usually it's that the card is zero interest for a certain amount of time. And then after that point, the interest you would pay on it is pretty astronomical. For example, my home bank has an offer for a zero interest credit card, but as soon as you hit that 1-year mark on the card, it skyrockets up to over 20% in interest. So if you're going to do the debt lasso method, you have to make sure you're keeping very close track of what debts you're transferring to these zero interest cards, because if you do not, you could end up just screwing yourself over even more with the amount of interest you're accruing. So you need to be confident that you can pay off your debt within the allotted time, or however much of that debt that you transferred over to the card with the allotted time that they give you. And you have to be very careful about reading the fine print on these offers. And if you can't pay it off in that allotted time, you still can transfer to another 0% offer, but once again, it just gets a little hairy and confusing if you're a disorganized person, or if you're going to get off track with your debt-free journey. You might end up kind of making yourself have to pay even more in interest. So you need to be very confident, very focused, very organized in order to do the transferring to a 0% aspect of this. But to call and negotiate down your interest rates, you can be anybody, and that is something that everybody really should be doing. So the debt lasso method is great for people who are able to read the fine print and can stay organized with their debt repayment journey. Also great for people who have a pretty strong understanding of credit already. If you're super confused when I'm talking about interest rates and things like that, I would not recommend using the debt lasso method, or at least transferring your balance to 0% cards, until you get a really full understanding of what all of these things mean. So as you can tell by reading these, it's possible to do some combination of multiple of them, especially aspects of the debt lasso method can apply to either the debt avalanche or the debt snowball method. And that's what I would encourage most people to do. Obviously, getting comfortable negotiating is a really important skill, so it's great to do that with your interest rates, because that's something that actually could also save you a lot of time and money. And of course, just learning the ins and outs of the credit system and different servicers and providers is a very useful life skill. But ultimately, the best debt repayment method is the one that you will stick to. So taking all these things into consideration when you look at your debt, how many accounts you have open, the interest rates on those accounts, and then you look inward to yourself and you're brutally honest and you think about what really will get you motivated and get you to stick to this journey, that is when you can determine which of these methods is best for you. Hope this video was helpful. I know it was a lot of information. If you need to watch it again or leave any comments below with questions, please do so. Make sure to subscribe to my channel, like this video, comment. It helps me grow this channel, get this information out to as many people as possible, and it means the world to me. Have an amazing rest of your week, everybody, and I will see you next week. Bye!